Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're talking about what's new with the updated version of the Softstar Switchback. So last year I tested the original Softstar Switchback, which is one of the best all-natural barefoot boots you can buy for hiking. But there were a couple things I thought could be improved, like the water resistance for one. It's not a completely waterproof boot, but especially along here, the stitching tended to let in a little bit too much water, and if I was out on like a slushy, snowy hike, my feet tended to get damp over time. Well, the stitching on mine's held up really well. There were a few people who had issues with separation. But then also I went with the Primal Toebox this time versus the regular one. The regular has more of your traditional slightly tapered cut, whereas the Primal is truly extra wide. It's a little bit more squared off. There's lots of room here for toe splay. And honestly, even with someone with medium width feet, I actually prefer the Primal. I think it just gives you more room for stacking up socks, and I like the toe splay. Plus the color is slightly different. There's a little more brown in it. I think it looks really cool, but the main difference with the new version of the Switchback is that they've simplified the stitching here. There's no more middle panel, which I think is one of the major places where water was getting in. You can see on the old ones there's an extra area where it's stitched here. And then another thing Softstar did with the new Switchback was they actually treated the laces for more water resistance, because one of the most likely causes of separation is that the laces were just kind of disintegrating with too much water. So while they're still not marketed as a waterproof boot, I was really interested to see what would happen if I took them out into some serious water. And it seems like the new stitching is a huge improvement, because I waded into the local canal and I just stood in the water for about 60 seconds and my feet didn't even get the slightest bit damp. Another change Softstar made that'll definitely help with that is gusseting the tongue, and now it's completely connected up to here, whereas it was separated before. And if you got any water running in, it could get damp pretty quick. So you can wade up to about the high ankle line before you start getting any water spilling in, which is awesome. Around back, they also changed the pull tab. They made it bigger so that you can actually fit your finger in there now, which is nice for carrying the boots. But they've also flipped it inside out, so it has this nice suede texture, which I think looks nice with the more glossy leather. Just for reference, here's the old version. It's really too small to fit your finger in there, and then like I said, it has more of a glossy leather look. The final change they made is that they switched from having a merino wool insole to a suede leather. And this is kind of nice because leather is still insulating, it's temperature regulating, it's antimicrobial, it's moisture wicking, but it's a little bit better for all season use. It doesn't get quite as warm in summer as merino can, especially a thicker merino. But it still feels really nice and soft, and it gives you about an extra 5 millimeters of padding. That said, even though it's squishy and doesn't affect ground feel much, it still takes up quite a lot of room in the boot. And for reference, my feet are 10.5 inches or 26.67 centimeters, and this is the 11. It fit me really well. It's snug, but there's still a little extra room there where I can stack up a couple layers of socks. Although if you're not between sizes like me, you might consider going up a size. You can also ask Softstar for advice. They're really helpful. I think beyond those changes though, it's still got all of the things that I loved about the original. You know, the upper is just so lightweight and flexible. You've got a full merino lining in there, but it's not super thick, so it actually can work in hotter weather if you just tend to like a higher cut boot or you need something that's water resistant. Like, it's been consistently in the 90s in New York, but as long as I was wearing some merino wool and gingy toe socks, it wasn't that bad hiking in the Switchback. Obviously my feet got a little damp and sweaty, as will happen in any higher cut boot when you're hiking in hot weather, but the merino wool does an excellent job of moving as much of that moisture out of the boot as possible. So that really all you get is like a general dampness rather than a swamp feel. In terms of the lacing, the way that I like to do it is leave the front pretty loose and then tighten from here up there a little bit more snugly around the ankle. And the Switchback is excellent for that too, because the leather sort of stretches and it's soft, so you can get it more snug than like a synthetic material without feeling like you're getting too much pressure around here. That said, if you're someone that likes to have the front or top of your barefoot shoes a little bit tighter, then you might consider getting like a flat lace and swapping them out, because these are a bit thicker. So if you tie them too tightly here, you can feel it through the thinner material. But another reason I can get away with leaving the Switchback looser in the front is because the leather is so soft that, like, even if I'm going around a really steep hill and my toes go into the front of the shoe, it's just like running into a pillow. You know, it's not like a synthetic material where there's this super hard guard here that are like crushing your toes. Anyways, the sole is the same, still has a really nice amount of flexibility. This is the Vibram Mega Grip sole. This is basically the best hardcore barefoot hiking sole that you can buy, because it's got these wider lugs on the outside, which are excellent for handling rocks, and then on the inside you've got these triangles that have a good amount of space, so they grip really well on wet terrain. And then Vibram has some of the stickiest rubber in the world. Like, when you first get these especially, you'll feel like, you know, it's almost like wearing Spider-Man boots. Because there's a good amount of space between the lugs, you also get some nice ground feel, even though this is an 11 millimeter boot. And part of that is that, like I said, the sole is 6 millimeters, and then The middle padding foam layer here is 5mm, so it compresses and allows a lot of feeling to come up through there versus just straight rubber. And because of all the surface area here, it's really good for rocks and even walking on roads, although for casual it can be a bit overkill. In terms of alternatives, this is the Vivobarefoot Tracker SG. Also has a wide toe box, but it's not as extra wide as the Primal, although it is rated for being fully waterproof with the wraparound guard here. And the tongue gusset is a similar level to the Switchback, maybe slightly higher. On the inside though, it's got more leather than wool. Really only the tongue here is padded, and then some of the inner bottom of the shoe, which has pros and cons. I think the Switchback is warmer, but the Tracker SG gives you a little bit more temperature range for not having the merino there, which allows you to wear thinner socks in the summer and thicker socks in the winter. Also a nicely flexible upper, but I would say the Switchback has a little more flex in the bottom of the boot. And for the sole, it's 7.5mm. This is Vivo's SG tread. It's got some really nice flexibility, kind of like the Mega Grip, but more space between the lugs. They're a little bit more claw-like, so it's designed for soft ground. It's really excellent like in the winter when it's super slushy and you're going on really steep hills. But for rocky terrain, I tend to prefer the Mega Grip sole with the Switchback because there's not as much surface area here, and these lugs, while they feel fine walking on rocks and roads, they can wear down a little bit faster. If you want a super warm barefoot boot for winter, this is the Lenka winter. It's got an extra wide toe box, fully leather upper. They say it's water resistant, but I found it to be completely waterproof. The glue is held really well. The only problem spot I had is right here. There's just like a tiny bit of separation right where that crease is. That's after 2 years of heavy use in the winter, so I'm pretty happy with them. Something I'm not happy with though is the laces. There's nothing really wrong with them, but they're just kind of dinky. They don't really match the kind of like rugged design of the boot. I wish they'd use something more like the Switchback laces instead of casual, but it is more of a casual wear boot, so I'm fine with that. But the inside is definitely more hardy. It's very thick merino wool. These are the warmest barefoot boots that I've ever tested. They've also got a gusseted tongue for waterproofing. And yeah, I've worn these all the way down to 0 degrees with no problem, even wearing just like one layer of merino wool and gingy toe socks and a thin wool felt insole to keep me warm. But one thing I'll say is that I think it is necessary to use a thinner insole versus the stock one that comes with the Lenka winter, because like Softstar, it does take up more room. And I would say these are even more lower volume because of all of the thick merino wool insulation. So yeah, definitely use something thinner. For the sole, it's 8mm, has some really nice flexibility to it, and it's very aggressive too. I love this lug pattern because it's claw-like, kind of like the Mega Grip and the Vivo SG, but the lugs kind of bend backwards, so when you're going on roads, it doesn't wear down these tips here. And in general, this is my favorite option for a casual hiker in really cold weather. Although I will say the rubber is a bit softer, which makes it nice for walking on roads, but the other two are better for more hardcore terrain. Finally, we've got the Xero Denver, which comes both in a leather version, this one, and a cotton canvas vegan one. It's got a fairly wide toe box, although it does have a little bit of taper in front, and the water resistance is pretty decent, especially if you treat it with wax. Unlike the others, the rubber sole doesn't wrap up as high, so it's not going to provide as much protection. And the sole isn't gusseted either, so this is definitely not one that I'd use for creek wading. But the insulation is more minimal. It's synthetic instead of wool. And it's a great boot for transition seasons where you don't want something super warm or super high, but you also need something a little bit more insulated than your standard hiking shoe. For the sole, it's 5.5mm, which is a thickness I really love for doing all sorts of terrain. It's got enough protection to go on some rocks, and it's a really durable sole. Xero's even got a 5,000-mile warranty, and they're not joking about that. I have some sandals that have the exact same sole with the Z-Trek, and they're still going after like 7 years, I think. No, actually it's 8 years now. Anyways, it's got a nice chevron lug pattern. They've also cut it here to give you a little bit more flexibility in the front of the boot. And then in the back, there's some nice protection for going on roads and rocks. So overall, a great budget option for doing pretty much anything except for maybe really steep, slippery hills. All right, so that's my first impression of you of the new Softstar Switchback, but I'll let you guys know how it goes in the long-term review when the temperature comes down a little bit below 90 degrees. But in the meantime, if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop with the referral links down below, browse and filter more products with the shoe finder tool at my website barefootwear.org, or watch my zero drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the Softstar Switchback or about barefoot shoes in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.